Ciao, Ian here again, and with my Ian on Grapes video series for the Ian Dagata Wine Review, we're talking native grapes, and we're going to talk about another Italian grape. I started writing about grapes a long time ago. This is the book that most people know, but in fact I was writing about them already in 2000 for an Italian wine magazine, and then I started writing about them for another Italian wine magazine, and then for Stephen Tanzer. The first article I ever wrote for Stephen Tanzer back, I think, in 2004 was on the native wine grapes and wines of Campania. And a lot of people were shocked because I was scoring Coda di Volpe wines much higher than Falanghino wines, because everybody was clearly importing Falanghino wines, and those are the ones they had to sell. Nobody knew anything about Coda di Volpe, and these guys were getting 91, 92, and they didn't have them to sell. So that was an interesting time in my life. The grape I want to talk to you about today is a Sicilian grape that you may not be as familiar with as some other ones, and it's called Perricone. Perricone, 2 R's, 1 C, sometimes also called Pignatello, is a grape that is typical of the western part of Sicily. And it's actually a grape that has a very long history. It was already much talked about in the 18th century. In fact, it was very common in the provinces of Palermo and Marsala. The British consul in about late 1880s, 1890s, fellow called Will Stigand said that the majority of the land around Palermo and Marsala was in fact planted to what he called Pignatello. And Perricone had the main job of producing pink wines. It was blended with white wines and gave a pink wine, or it was used to make a ruby Marsala wines. In other words, the red tinged Marsala wine, which was once very, very popular. Perricone is a pretty grape to look at. It's got medium-sized bunches and grapes. The one problem it has is that it succumbs very easily to most diseases and pests. Even though it was very common in Sicily, it was essentially wiped out by phylloxera. And so when the Sicilian farmers had to replant after phylloxera on American rootstocks, they opted for other grape varieties that are in general more resistant to diseases than Perricone. And you can't blame them. They have to survive, and at the time nobody was going to pay a lot of money for a wine that wasn't famous, so they opted for more resistant stuff. Today Perricone has made a real comeback. It had really started to wane, there was, for example, a 30% drop in plantings from roughly 2000 to 2010. So its comeback is a recent event. I can tell you that if I'd been doing this video series back in 2010, Perricone was not on too many people's radars, but that's changed because in that decade from 2010 to 2020, people started to replant it, and there all of a sudden, from 2 or 3 producers who were selling it locally, all of a sudden we started having 8 to 10 producers who were selling it internationally. The advantage of Perricone is that it gives you a fairly light colored wine. When you get a very dark colored Perricone, that is usually the sign of some winemaking or blending with other varieties. Remember that by European law you can varietally name a wine but still have 15% other wine in there made with another grape, maybe a darker grape. But the anthocyan profile of Perricone is in many ways reminiscent of that of Sangiovese or Nebbiolo, even though Malvin is its most famous most abundant anthocyan. Really about 30% of Perricone's anthocyans are cyanine, pionine, delphin, so it's going to give you a light colored red wine. But it gives you a very perfumed wine, a very fragrant wine, juicy, fruity, delicious, very in tune with modern lifestyles. And in fact, today when I do a wine tasting on Sicilian wines, the Perricone wines are almost always in the top 2 or 3 favorites of the night. People really like Perricone, and there are more and more producers making it. Remember, when you get a Perricone that's very tannic and very dark, it's probably been blended with other grape varieties. Syrah is a big blender. But if you get a nice, juicy, fruity, light on its feet, not too dark colored Perricone, you probably got the real thing. There are some fantastic producers of Perricone. Feudo Montoni is for sure one. Another one is Caruso and Minini. And so if you've never tried a Perricone wine, do it. It's a great pizza, pasta, burger wine, and you will love it. Cheers.